His 8-year-old daughter had maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia killed her. The Lakota father stood in the pouring rain, watching her lips turn purple, watching her shake so hard she couldn't hold the buffalo hide around her shoulders. His 6-year-old son had stopped complaining 10 minutes ago. That was worse. When kids stop complaining, you're running out of time. They were 3 days from camp. Temperature dropped from 50 degrees to 30 in less than 3 hours. And the father had everything he needed to save his children's lives, except the one thing most modern people consider absolutely essential: fire. Actually, that's not quite true. He didn't need fire. He needed to make fire from nothing, in a rainstorm. In the next 10 minutes, or his daughter was dead. His 12-year-old son watched with eyes asking the question nobody wanted to say out loud. "Dad, can you actually do this?" One match would fix everything. One Bic lighter would save them all right now, but he didn't have matches, didn't have a lighter, didn't have anything that would make this easy. What he had was 2 sticks, some dried plants in a leather pouch, and knowledge his grandfather beat into his head during a storm just like this one 20 years ago. Knowledge that said you can make fire anywhere, anytime, in any weather. You just have to know how. Most people today can't start a fire with matches and a bottle of lighter fluid. Plains tribes could create flames in minutes during storms that would make modern survivalists give up and call for rescue. Drop a comment if you've ever failed miserably trying to start a fire in the rain. And subscribe, because what you're about to learn could literally save your life. The father's hands were shaking, but not from the cold. His daughter made a small whimpering sound. His 12-year-old son moved closer to the younger kids, trying to share what little body heat he had left. They were watching him, waiting, running out of time. Here's what kills people in situations like this. It's not the cold, it's not the rain, it's panic. In 2019, a hiker died from hypothermia 2 miles from his car in Montana. His matches got wet. He had a backup lighter that wouldn't spark in the humidity. He had emergency fire-starting tools in his pack, and he froze to death because when nothing worked, he panicked instead of using his brain. The Lakota father knelt in the mud and started sorting through his pack with hands that knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't hope. This wasn't prayer. This was method. He pulled out 2 pieces of wood that looked like nothing special, just sticks. But these sticks had been shaped, dried, and carried for weeks specifically for a moment like this. The flat one was cottonwood, soft enough to powder fast. The round one was sagebrush, harder, shaped smooth. His 12-year-old son had seen these before but never understood why his father carried them. Now, watching his little sister shake, he understood perfectly. The father pulled out a curved stick strung with rawhide cord and handed it to his son. "Hold this. Don't let it get wet." Then he reached inside his shirt and pulled out a small leather pouch that hung against his chest. Inside was what looked like a handful of plant fluff, cedar bark fibers, cattail fuzz, dried grass, stuff you'd walk past without a second look. But here's what the father knew that modern people don't. That stuff was the difference between life and death. And it had been prepared weeks ago, kept dry against his body, waiting for exactly this moment. His son watched him sort through the tinder. Then his father did something that made no sense. He reached deeper into that leather pouch and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in moss and rotted wood. He unwrapped it carefully, protecting it from the rain, and inside was something glowing. Stay with me here, because this next part is going to blow your mind. The father was holding fire, not a match, not a lighter, an ember, a coal from a fire they'd made 3 weeks ago when they left the main camp, still alive, still glowing faintly in the rotted wood powder. His 12-year-old son stared at it like magic, but it wasn't magic. It was something more impressive than magic. They were carrying fire with them, fire that never died, fire that had been kept alive through 3 weeks of travel across the plains. Some Cheyenne families could keep embers smoldering for months while migrating, entire winter journeys with fire that never went out. Think about what that means. They didn't start from scratch every time they needed warmth. They carried a piece of their last fire to their next fire, an unbroken chain of flames stretching back generations. Archaeological evidence shows the ember carriers Cheyenne families designed were sophisticated pieces of engineering. Air holes positioned exactly right to keep the coal alive without burning out, rotted wood that smoldered but didn't flame, moss that held just enough moisture to prevent complete combustion. Military survival schools still teach this technique today because once you understand ember preservation, you realize modern people are doing survival completely backwards. But here's the problem. That ember was barely alive, weak, not strong enough to survive the wind and rain hammering down. The father needed something hotter, something fresh, something powerful enough to withstand conditions that would snuff out that fragile coal in seconds. He needed to generate a new ember, right here, right now, in the middle of a rainstorm. The father positioned the flat cottonwood board on a piece of bark to keep it out of the mud. He wrapped the bow cord once around the sagebrush spindle. His son held a curved piece of bark over his hands like an umbrella, and then he started moving. The bow went back and forth in smooth, controlled strokes, not frantic, not desperate, controlled. The spindle spun against the fireboard, and within seconds, smoke started rising. The 8-year-old stopped shaking long enough to watch. She'd seen campfires before. She'd never seen someone create fire from absolutely nothing. The father kept going. 30 seconds, 45. The smoke got thicker. Black powder accumulated in the notch carved into the fireboard, getting darker with each stroke. Most people quit here. They see smoke and think they're done. That's the mistake that kills you. 60 seconds, 90. The powder was nearly black now, and deep inside it, a tiny red glow appeared. The ember glowed like a tiny, angry eye staring up from the black dust. The father tapped it carefully onto his bark platform. He'd just created an ember at 800 degrees. That's hotter than your kitchen oven at full blast, hot enough to melt aluminum cans into puddles from friction between two pieces of wood in the pouring rain. Scientists tested this exact technique in 2018 and couldn't believe the temperatures these friction fires could generate. The Lakota didn't have thermometers. They just knew. The 12-year-old son was staring at that tiny glowing coal like it was magic. His father caught his eye. Not magic. Science. Your grandfather's science. Hold on. Because what happens next is the part where most modern people fail completely, even when they've done everything else right. The father transferred the ember into his tinder bundle and started folding it into a nest shape, creating air pockets. His son thought he'd start blowing on it, trying to make it catch. But the father didn't blow. He breathed, slow, controlled, feeding oxygen to the ember without scattering it. The tinder started smoking, thin wisps at first, then thicker. The smell of burning wood cut through the rain. The father rotated the bundle, keeping the ember alive, building heat. The 8-year-old had stopped shivering. She was watching her father create fire in a rainstorm, and then flame. Small at first, just a flicker in the cedar bark, but it grew. The father fed it carefully, adding the driest materials first, building it larger. His 12-year-old son grabbed bigger pieces from their pack, dry buffalo chips they'd been protecting. Within 2 minutes of starting, they had a fire. A real, sustainable fire that was burning despite rain hammering down around them. The younger kids moved closer to the warmth. Color started returning to their faces. The father looked at his oldest son. "Your turn tomorrow. I'm going to watch you do it." The 12-year-old's eyes went wide, but he nodded. Because this wasn't just survival. This was education. This was how knowledge stayed alive. Ray Mears spent years studying this technique. He's a British survival expert who's probably forgotten more about wilderness survival than most people ever learn. He tested Lakota fire-starting methods in the rain and called it the most reliable wet-weather fire system he'd ever encountered. More dependable than ferro rods, more consistent than flint and steel, more practical than trying to keep matches dry. The U.S. Army thought so too. In 1957, they published Field Manual 2176, their official survival guide. The friction fire section, copied almost word for word from Plains tribal techniques, military Sierra schools, where they train pilots to survive behind enemy lines, still teach ember preservation methods taken directly from the Cheyenne. But here's what really makes you think. When archaeologists ran tests comparing traditional methods against modern gear, they found something that should change how you think about survival equipment. The Lakota father sat with his kids around the fire, watching them warm up. His daughter had stopped shaking. His 6-year-old son was holding his hands so close to the flames his father had to pull him back, and his 12-year-old was staring at the bow and spindle like he was seeing them for the first time. "Grandpa taught you this?" he asked. "In a storm worse than this one," the father said. "I was about your age. We were hunting elk and got caught in an early snow. He made me practice until I could do it in under 2 minutes. How long did it take you today?" The father smiled. "About 90 seconds. I'm getting slow." The boy picked up the bow, feeling its weight, examining how the cord was attached. His father watched him and saw his own grandfather's eyes looking back. This was how knowledge survived. Not in books, not in videos, in storms where your life depended on remembering every detail. Bow drill in 90% humidity. Experienced users succeeded 87% of the time. Modern campers with waterproof matches? Only 45%. Think about that for a second. You just spent $300 on a survival kit. Waterproof matches, ferro rods, emergency fire starters, fancy magnesium blocks. It works less than half the time in wet conditions. 2 sticks and knowledge work 87% of the time. Which one are you betting your kid's life on? Because that's how knowledge survives, not in libraries or databases, in storms where children watch their fathers create fire from nothing and understand that the old ways weren't primitive. They were proven. The Lakota didn't hope for fire in impossible conditions. They commanded it, not through magic or luck, but through knowledge passed from grandfather to grandson in rainstorms just like this one. That knowledge is still out there, still being taught, still working exactly as it did 1,000 years ago, waiting for anyone willing to learn. The storm kept pounding the prairie. Inside their shelter, the Lakota family sat around the fire the father had built from 2 sticks and knowledge. His daughter was warm again, laughing at something her little brother said. His 12-year-old son was still holding the bow, turning it over in his hands, imagining the day he'd have to use it for real. The father watched him and remembered his own grandfather's words from 20 years ago, spoken in another storm. This isn't about fire. Fire is easy. This is about trust, trusting knowledge, trusting preparation, trusting that what worked for our ancestors will work for you. The boy looked up. Will you teach me the ember carrier next? The father nodded. Tomorrow, when the storm breaks. You can learn this, not from a YouTube video, though this helps. You need to do it. Tribal cultural centers across the country offer workshops taught by people who learned from elders. The Lakota Winter Camp program still teaches ancestral techniques that work just as well today. Bushcraft schools have started incorporating these methods because they work. Start simple. Practice in dry conditions first. Learn to identify woods by feel and weight. Practice the bow drill motion until it's automatic. Build your skills the same way Plains children did, gradually, under guidance. And support the programs preserving this knowledge. These aren't museum pieces. These are life-saving skills being kept alive by people who understand their value. Subscribe to this channel because we're going deep into survival techniques most people have never heard of. Next time, we're looking at how Southwest desert tribes found water in places where GPS says none exists. 3 campers in South Dakota needed helicopter rescue in 2022 after a night in wet conditions. They had ferro rods, waterproof matches, emergency fire starters. None of it worked when the rain started and the wind picked up. The techniques Plains tribes mastered aren't cute historical facts. They're proven survival skills that work better than most modern alternatives. And the last generation who learned them directly from tribal elders, they're aging out. Their knowledge is disappearing because everyone assumed modern gear made ancient skills unnecessary. Until your expensive equipment fails and you realize that knowledge weighs nothing, breaks nothing, and works when everything else quits. This matters right now, today, in ways most people don't understand. Climate change is making weather more extreme and less predictable. The gentle camping conditions your grandparents knew, those are disappearing. Storms hit harder, temperature swings are more dramatic, conditions that used to be rare are becoming normal, and we're losing the knowledge that helped people survive exactly these situations. 700 Americans die from hypothermia every year. Not in the Arctic, not in some extreme survival situation, in conditions that wouldn't have challenged a Plains family because they had $300 worth of gear and zero knowledge of fundamentals. That Montana hiker who died 2 miles from his car, he had backup gear, he had emergency supplies. What he didn't have was the ability to make fire when everything failed. But here's what the boy didn't know yet. What his father hadn't told him. The real secret wasn't the technique, it was the preparation. The father knew that storm was coming 6 hours before the first raindrop fell. He'd watched the clouds changing, noticed how the wind shifted, seen the birds flying differently. So while the sky was still clear, he'd checked his tinder bundle, made sure his bow cord had enough resin, verified his ember was still alive in its carrier. Because Plains tribes understood something crucial. Fire doesn't start when you need it. Fire starts hours before when you prepare for what's coming.